On a very significant and powerful evening, well, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz started having huge problems. Along with him, problems also began for Ursula von der Leyen from the very same European Union and her subordinate, the EU's top diplomat, Kaja Kallas. What you call a person shapes how they turn out. And in this episode, we'll look at a few more very interesting things. Before we begin, I'll show you a video, also extremely interesting, about how people talk to recruiters in one of the cities of Ukraine. Honestly, I don't know which city this is, but I think it's Odessa, maybe not, so let me know if you know where this is happening. So here's the thing. The recruiters, as usual, came to recruit people and picked up a few men, but it turned out that one of them was a boxer. And, well, basically he had a talk with them. And YouTube forbids showing or discussing any kind of violence in videos, no matter how much you try to convince me otherwise. I'm a cake blogger, so I know about this. That's why I'm showing you separate frames. And you can watch the full video on my channel by pointing your smartphone or tablet camera at this QR code. Or if you're watching me on a mobile device, just tap or click the link in the video description and you'll end up exactly where you need to be. There, basically, this young man dishes out so much that not everyone could take it. Now let's get down to business. Here we have Friedrich Merz, and he's got problems. He started talking about how he's going to make Germany great again and Europe too, but suddenly he started off a bit wrong. For some reason, he started talking about Ukraine instead of Germany's internal problems. And here's what he said about Europe. Without Europe, he says, achieving these goals, in other words, making Germany great again, is impossible. You can feel how highly Europe is valued around the world as a reliable partner. But this feeling is kind of like a weather forecast, you know. It's 15 degrees above zero, but what you actually feel is close to zero. Well, that's pretty much how it is, I think. There are some agreements, some confirmations de jure, there are documents written de facto with Europe now and the world's attitude toward it, including the greatest respect and admiration from the dove of peace, Trump. It's just the talk of the town. Merz talked about how the European Union is using opportunities to expand trade ties and reduce dependence. But one of the dependencies and reductions is cutting off their own, damn oil and gas, which they were relying on. And in conclusion, I mean the Russian Federation and its cheap energy resources. And instead, in order to be more independent, they signed an agreement to buy the same oil products from the US. At a huge markup, I think, at a price of 850 billion euros for everything. Of course, that's a reduction in dependence, though in a negative way, but still a reduction. There's no other way to call it. And again, he says there are countries that, together with the EU, want to reduce it, to preserve a rules-based global order. Therefore, in order to establish order, Ordnung as I recall in German, it is necessary to increase Germany's competitiveness. The European Union also needs renewal, and for that, bureaucracy must be reduced. And here, by the way, is the most interesting hint, a broad hint at subtle circumstances. Namely, at Kaja Kallas. She is about to be dismissed. We'll talk about that now. First, let's see what Merz said and what happened. And then we'll continue. So, the EU's new multi-annual financial framework, according to Merz, should be accompanied by a fundamental modernization of the European budget. Obviously, this means sending even more money to Ukraine so that the war continues. I think this is actually the main agenda. Merz demands that future common funds be used for joint investments, primarily for the purposes of sovereignty, increasing competitiveness, and defense. Competitiveness and defense, according to Merz, apparently belong to Ukraine, which in turn belongs to Europe. And for this, it is necessary to strengthen NATO's eastern flank. And Germany supports efforts to achieve a peaceful solution to prevent war. In the long term, says Merz, Ukraine belongs to the EU. He recently offered Ukraine the status of an associate member of the EU, which Ukraine, represented by Zelensky, refused. And quite rudely at that. Well, as usual, actually, Zelensky said. Come on, what are you talking about here? Here I am, well, it's about the same as it was in the song, in the letter. And then Alternative for Germany said everything they think about this, and their opinion isn't very positive. So negative, in fact, that apparently the coalition of willing countries, this powerful group, has similar thoughts. They announced that they want to reform the European Union's diplomatic service. The head of this European Union diplomatic service, an absolute expert on all issues, is Kaja Kallas. And that's why options for reforming the diplomatic service, which was created 15 years ago, are being discussed. By the way, 15 years ago was 2011, and in my opinion, that's about when serious problems started in Europe. Before that, there weren't really any major problems without a strong diplomatic corps. Well, I mean, there were problems, but they were apparently solved by diplomats of the old school who didn't need any special diplomacy to organize their work properly. They created an additional diplomatic corps and appointed Kaja Kallas. According to 5 sources from the publication, namely the Financial Times, it was the first to report this. One of the options involves stripping the head of Eurodiplomacy, Kaja Kallas, and her agency, the European External Action Service, of their powers with a budget of 1 billion euros per year. Yes, can you imagine? Not a bad job. You get 1 billion euros a year, you travel, eat well, and talk about how things should be, how to be powerful. And over there, they need more money, and over there too, but here you need to cut the cable, and there we don't need a pipeline. And in general, everything needs to be made very independent. And the US is leading the whole world, helping Europe become independent. Obviously, representatives of the Financial Times say that this very service doesn't work like that, it's dysfunctional, the problems are structural, which means the structure itself needs to be rebuilt. Well, to be honest, this immediately reminds me of the joke about how, a brothel stopped making a profit, and the owner started rearranging the beds. And an experienced person says, no, you need to change the people who work there. Well, it sounds a bit different, of course, but it's a little inappropriate, so I'm describing it in familiar and decent terms, just like what's happening here in Europe right now. I'm in Europe myself, too. Let me remind you, I'm a Spanish citizen living and broadcasting in Spain. Someone might comment, but let's not discuss that. So, in private conversations, representatives of European countries note that the functions of this very diplomatic corps, national ministries, and basically all this bureaucracy overlap with each other and suffer from a lack of coordination. That's quite a twist, you could say, and we'd be right about that. Because looking at what's been happening in Europe lately in terms of decision-making and governance, here, the right hand doesn't know what to do, one hand washes the other, but they really do wash each other quite well. But the problem really is structural in nature. Kaja Kallas, according to several sources, expresses his own position too often on issues such as relations between the EU and China, and puts forward proposals that have not yet been approved by European capitals. Again, it's important to understand that high-level diplomats do shape diplomatic relations with other countries, but strictly in the process of interacting with other state bodies, or with supranational entities such as the European Union, the European Commission, and all these European structures. It's not the diplomatic corps itself that says today we'll do this, tomorrow that, and the day after tomorrow something else. No, the diplomatic corps implements the decisions made by the leaders of the state, by the state itself, and therefore on a large scale. It's not just waking up grumpy and deciding to argue with someone saying China is bad. Tomorrow it's like, oh, let's unfreeze those Russian assets and send them somewhere, I don't know, let's make everyone in the world happy. Well, I mean, let's make all the Zelenskys in the world happy. And they make all the Zelenskys in the world happy, saying, well, when the reparations come, then you'll pay back the loans we gave you. And for now, you can use these funds and not worry about it. I mean, resist and be a steel porcupine like in Iran. It looks very interesting. Then suddenly Europe wanted to get involved in the negotiation process with Ukraine, the US, and Russia. We're joking here in our chat, the one I advertised to you, the Telegram channel. We're joking about the fact that they forgot to invite Cameroon, Bangladesh, and Albania, for example, too. A powerful country economically, politically, and militarily. In short, everyone needs to be invited, because, well, how can you do anything without everyone's opinion, without all this marketplace chatter? Absolutely nothing. So, Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy, stated that there should be a single representative of the European Union, just one, to participate in the negotiations with Russia, Europe, Ukraine, and the USA. The real problem, Meloni says, is that no format has the legitimacy to speak on behalf of all of Europe. Somewhere around here, Kaja Kallas probably got upset. For this reason, I have long advocated for the need to identify an authoritative figure who enjoys the trust and mandate of all member states to convey Europe's point of view. Therefore, countries must work on security guarantees for Kiev and on creating a new European architecture. We'll break down the old, build the new, and this wonderful new paradise will continue to flourish and thrive as I understand it, and so will Europe. The European architecture will lie down with the lambs somewhere in the bushes, lying peacefully side by side, not what you might think, and for that we need such a negotiator. On top of that, we now have new, even more powerful leaders. These ones, I mean, they're old. But for some reason, their opinion is starting to change, and now they need to get Trump's support for some reason to resume negotiations with Russia. The powerful leaders are concerned, among whom, by the way, Merz is somehow the most tanned. I'm not sure, but do people in Germany get sun all day and 40-degree heat? He's the most tanned. Macron should be tanned since France is warmer. Well, Starmer, that's understandable. It's foggy over there in the misty Albion, but Merz... So, the UK, France, and Germany are planning to take their own tougher positions in discussions with Moscow. These leaders believe that the course of the war has shifted in Ukraine's favor. And this creates an opportunity for negotiations that will go beyond the terms that were announced after Trump's meeting with Vladimir Putin in Anchorage, Alaska, in August 2025. According to them, the new approach is planned to be discussed with Trump at the G7 meeting in France next week. The leaders of the Euro-Troika want Russia to agree to an immediate ceasefire along the current front line as a starting point for negotiations. I've already read this to you. It's the same situation as before. They're dragging it out little by little. First, it's an immediate ceasefire. Second, the introduction of peacekeepers, not from the UN or China as was discussed before, but directly from NATO, which of course Russia will never agree to. Then third, reparations. And a couple more points like that, which again, no one is going to agree to. And on top of that, Europe is starting to take part in this negotiation process. I think that's just wonderful. The negotiation process instantly became much livelier. You see, every day diplomatic corps meet. Every day there are negotiations about peace. Some agreements are made. Some documents are signed. But apparently that's only in the dreams of powerful leaders, because right now nothing has even started there yet, in the peaceful field of the negotiation process. Well, old Starmer, Merz, Emmanuel Macron made all this public after their Sunday meeting with Zelensky. Of course, their meeting looked pretty funny. Everyone is looking at Zelensky and he's telling them what to do, where to write, what to write, and where to sign. I already made a video about Merz, and there he was already being called the Chancellor of Ukraine. Well, that's because Zelensky spends more time in Germany than in Ukraine itself, especially, by the way, when Ukraine is being bombed for some reason. And apparently there are some reasons for that. But then suddenly there's a betrayal, because Poland started demanding money. They say, we want money. Poland is demanding almost €500 million from the European Union for military aid to Ukraine. That's the kind of aid we're talking about. Zelensky managed to quarrel with his closest neighbor and with the Hungarians and with the Poles by naming one of the brigades something like after the UPA. And now the Poles naturally are outraged. The Deputy Minister of Defense stated that the funds need to be allocated. And these 6 billion euros from the European Peace Fund, which are being sent to Ukraine, Poland is claiming 450 million euros. Poland insists on full reimbursement for the weapons it has supplied to Ukraine. But Germany suggests directing these funds directly to support Kyiv. However, this raises another question. But what's the point of this diplomatic corps of the European Union, which is headed by that same Kaja Kallas, who apparently is about to be dismissed? All of this seems like some strange plot from a very successful movie, and we, the viewers, are just watching, unable to do anything about it. The problem is that the EU has spent about 43 billion euros through the fund, but only 0.6 billion euros are currently available for distribution. There is no money. So Kaja Kallas said, let's partially reimburse countries for their expenses, fund the training of Ukrainian soldiers, and allocate part of the money to purchase weapons for Ukraine. And these funds, says the representative of Poland, are our money. In practice, less of this money means less money for the army. And he accused Brussels of trying to change the rules in the middle of the game. Here, I don't know if he's right or not, but it sounds quite logical that if you keep sending all the money in the same direction all the time, we know which one. Nothing good will come of it in the end. That's how things are for us. Plus, there's Trump and the Iran situation, but let's discuss that in another video after I gather more data. Let me know if you want to watch a video where I talk about Iran and the current little war, once again stirred up by Trump together with Iran. There are already new threats about seizing various sites in Iran. Iran is making threats too. In short, the world is still vast and incredible. Just amazing. Now let's take a look at some powerful leaders. I have them. And so, of course, I think the actions of Europe's diplomatic corps characterize us. We characterize ourselves as much as possible by our work.
Своей работы максимально.
We are as satisfied as possible with our work, but unfortunately, our work did not yield any results.
Well, in general, this is no longer surprising, so let's look at the powerful leaders. One of them is the historian Poli, who once told Winfrey Television that he went somewhere, his stomach started hurting, and that's why he thinks he was poisoned. Russian intelligence poisoned him. He told this live on air, and the journalist had such an interesting reaction to all of it that, well, all of us, I showed you that clip back then, you could only listen to Poli there. That's crazy. Well, look, on the left is Poli himself, and on the right we have young Lenin. He once evolved into a young Elton John, put on glasses, changed his hairstyle, shaved his beard, but now he's back to his old look, once again, young Lenin. He already has a shirt, a tie, all that's missing is a frock coat, a three-piece suit, and a cap. Well, let's forgive the cap. But let's listen. So,
there is no sense in using nuclear weapons on the front line. Why? Because right now, there are only a small number of people on the front line at any given time. So it's like, I don't know, throwing a bomb at flies, because there aren't many people, and accordingly, it won't be that.
Honestly, I don't really understand what historian Poli has to do with military operations, but it's like an accountant explaining the structure of a tank division, for example. Well, maybe he can talk about it if he reads something somewhere. Probably he can. But if he comes to tell this in front of the military and stands before their bright eyes, it will probably be a little funny. That's why it's extremely strange that historians, psychologists, by the way, we haven't had psychologists on air for a long time, not just one, I mean some woman, a psychologist also talks about the war. And it would be fine if she talked about PTSD and things like that, but no, she actually expresses her own thoughts about military actions in a rather chaotic way. It's very strange, I don't understand why, but you have no military operations specialists, even though there are so many military people in Ukraine now, like half the country. Half are fighting in the army, half are supplying the army. So get a specialist. Why do you need a historian?
In short, this will cause significantly more problems for Russia, as if for...
Young Lenin is clearly bored. He's sitting there, even his hair looks like that already, thinking, no, this isn't our format. We need to invite someone else.
He clearly said that he cannot transfer nuclear warheads to Ukraine in case of use.
Young Lenin decided to show off his watch. Look, what a yellow watch, but actually he seems tired from the Polia, because Poli, by the way, in Russian means arsonist. Arsonist, yes, so it's interesting what he's setting on fire and who's, I think...
That this would sharply reduce the desire in Russia to even talk about such things.
Yes. Well, there's no point in commenting here. What he's saying is not about the essence, not about the form, and not about the content, because, well, it's just a separate phrase. And now let's take a look. Here we suddenly have Laptin popping up and talking about how the IPSO works, about immigrants who will take jobs. Obviously, the judge's son, which is Laptin, understands Ukrainian immigration policy perfectly. And by the way, he's also knowledgeable in military affairs. He was wounded on various Kursk and other fronts and took part in battles with the Pechenegs. In short, after that, this guy in glasses, that's Laptin as far as I know, he doesn't work, he doesn't fight, he got discharged and travels abroad. Well, he's living his best life, buying expensive motorcycles. Apparently, the military get huge salaries. Of course, he talks about draft dodgers and how he deals with them. And now he's saying, well, so what if the male population of Ukraine is dying out? So what if it's being replaced by migrants? The main thing is that Laptin is happy. Time.
So they'll bring some Indians here. Did you check this case?
I'd rather put on some powerful glasses with Laptin because they protect this environment from the ionizing, all-penetrating radiation of power that comes in a strong, continuous stream from this character.
For the viewers, The point is simple. You go fight and your jobs won't be left empty. Do you understand? That's exactly how Russian IPSO works. It's meant to stir up society inside the country, to sow this hatred for something that doesn't even exist yet.
Yeah, sure, everything is fine in Ukraine. It's all just IPSO. People aren't being bundled into buses. There's no hatred. Just like in the video I showed at the very beginning where the guy is peacefully talking with those peaceful manhunters. Of course, that doesn't happen. There's no separation based on language, none based on political preferences either. There's none based on the military or religion. In Ukraine, everyone is united, like monolithic military, social, and economic entities. Just amazing.
So the narrative is that you have to accept it. They'll razbruюють you. You have to go serve in the OPRU, but
It seems that sometimes you'd like to hear more coherent speech. What does razbruюють mean? In Ukrainian, there's the word razbruюють, disarmament, disarming, but razbruюють, that's really something. He's a good speaker, and his speech is interesting, and his look too.
understand you have to prepare your documents, say goodbye to your children, to your wives, and go to war. Specialists will arrive and replace you in those positions where you work. So everyone will have time.
To prepare. They're still mixing up the tenses, and they will replace you there. Well, let's listen one more time.
Well, specialists will arrive and replace you in the positions where you will be working.
In the positions where you will be working. In the positions where you will have worked. Working. Well, for goodness sake, what is this? Is this an interview or what?
Therefore, everyone will have an hour to prepare. That is, it's super toxic, very toxic, of course, or extremely non-toxic. Going to war and preparing, so it's super non-toxic. And
Apparently this young man, who of course is not registered anywhere as a Bygolovka. There! A military man, handsome, big and strong. He will be telling real soldiers that they are toxic. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, overall, what else? Bye, everyone.
Dear home front, especially those watching us, even if it's tough, enlist so you don't have to deal with the TCC. If you're unemployed, please do. We've discussed this on air for 5 years straight. Mobilization isn't just about the front line. There are many roles in the military that need you and your involvement. Also donate support, because it's extremely important.
We will be very grateful. More precisely, our guys will be very grateful to you. So for me, yes, with awareness, with a sense of justice, by my own example, and there is such a team. Do as I do.